Hello, I'm taking on a challenge to beat every playable Nintendo-published game. The next game is the Battle of Olympus. Well, here we are, another third-party title I had never heard about before starting the challenge. In Japan, the game was published by Imagineer under their Wave Jack Jr. label. I'm not too familiar with Imagineer, but a quick look at their history reveals that they were a pretty young company that had only released a few games at this point. Later on, they also started publishing a lot of ports, and they're even the eventual ones responsible for the fitness boxing series that I'll be playing later on in the challenge. Alright, so if the game wasn't published by Nintendo in Japan, what was the Western release like? Well, it was actually quite similar to the Guardian Legend. In the US, the game was published by Broderbund, and we can see some design similarities with their Guardian Legend box. Speaking of, Broderbund totally reused Nintendo of America's series labels on these games. Looking at all the titles Broderbund published on the NES, they are each a part of either the Action series or the Adventure series, which are both labels Nintendo used for their own games. Anyway, like the Guardian Legend, it was Nintendo that published the Battle of Olympus in various countries in Europe, with Nintendo standard asterisk directing you to Imagineer's name on the back. Hey, at least this time the covers all look consistent with each other. So, that's the game's publishing history, but who actually made it? Well, the game was developed by a small company called Infinity. Previously, they only had a few small contracting projects, one of which was for an Imagineer game called Kieta Princess. Yukio Horimoto, Infinity's president and programmer, pitched the idea for a game inspired by Greek mythology to Imagineer, and Infinity received the green light for the project. The game's credits boast a whopping 3 people: Horimoto himself as a scenario writer and programmer, Reiko Oshida as a co-writer and the one behind the graphics, and Kazuo Osawa as the composer. Now, Horimoto and Oshida writing the story together is no coincidence. Oshida was previously hired by Infinity as an artist, and Horimoto and Oshida fell in love as they worked together, and they even eventually got married. They wanted to make a game together, which is how the Battle of Olympus came to be. Perhaps inspired by their own love, the game is based on the story of Orpheus, who attempted to rescue his wife Eurydice from the underworld. The gameplay of the Battle of Olympus, on the other hand, was clearly inspired by Zelda 2. You don't even have to take my word for it, as Horimoto himself said that the jumping, ducking, and attacking motions were all intentional imitations of Zelda 2. He said that these inspirations were born out of an admiration for Nintendo's games, as he considered them to be some of the best at the time. What resulted was an ambitious title that the team of 3 made in only around half a year. Now, it doesn't seem like the Battle of Olympus ended up performing super well, and Infinity largely went on to focus on porting American PC games to Japanese systems instead. I don't want to spoil too much of my review yet, but I think it's a bit of a shame they didn't develop more original games, as I think the Battle of Olympus showed that they had a lot of potential as game designers. So, now that we know the story behind how this game came to be, let's take a look at my time with the Battle of Olympus. Right on the title screen, we can see a bit of a mess as far as the copyrights go. We've got Imagineer, Infinity, Broderbund, and Nintendo of America all vying for some screen space here. As a reminder, this is the US release since I have an NTSC console. Anyway, after this, I was able to enter the names of the 2 main characters. I named the hero Shmobi and the heroine Hilda. The game immediately threw me into the gameplay after this, so it looks like I'll be turning to the manual once again to figure out what's going on. The canon name for the main characters are Orpheus and Helene, which is a bit funny since in the original myth the guy's name was Orpheus, but Helene's name was originally Eurydice. Anyway, Orpheus and Helene were in love, but Helene died at the hands of a venomous snake. Orpheus grieved her death, but Aphrodite, the goddess of love, told him that Helene was actually taken by Hades so that he could make her his queen. Aphrodite challenged Orpheus to rescue Helene and told him that he would need to search for 3 nymphs to guide him to the underworld. When starting, I was shown a map, and it looks like I'm in some place called Arcadia. Immediately, I noticed just how similar the movement in this game is to Zelda 2, although it looks like for now, I just have a club instead of a sword. I entered a house and found an old man that told me that the first thing I should do is to go see Zeus. This was some kind of town, and I found all sorts of people who gave me clues like this. I learned that I could create fire with the Staff of Fennel, that a sword was in the forest of Peloponnesus, there was stuff hidden in the trees, and that inside a cave there might be an invisible door. Somehow I get the feeling this is gonna be one of those games with cryptic clues and secrets. Anyway, I wandered around the nearby forest and found some slimes. These things dropped health and some kind of red orb, and it took me a second to realize that you need to duck to pick up monster drops. Inside a tree, some old lady said that this path led to Argolis, and she warned that I was too weak to go there. I defied her warning and went there anyway, but immediately after seeing a dude with a spear, I ran back into the tree like a coward. I found another old lady in a tree, and she said something cryptic about 3 different hearts that I assumed I would need to find throughout the game. After wandering the forest some more, I found a lady in a tree that said I could find the Staff of Fennel in Attica. Finally, I found another guy that told me that to get through Peloponnesus, I needed the power to jump and the power of fire. Geez, this is a lot of info to remember already. After entering one of the houses here, I was suddenly taken to Attica, the place where I could supposedly find the Staff of Fennel. I decided to wander around the forest some more before going there. I eventually stumbled on some kind of temple that was guarded by a massive bull who charged right through me. He took out half of my health, but he ran off screen so I didn't have to worry about him anymore. In the temple, I found Zeus. That was some guard you placed out there. He told me that I would need to call upon the power of Argus by using the sword of Hephaestus, and Zeus said that he would tell the other gods to assist me. That's all, just a vague clue, no upgrades? Thanks a lot, Zeus. I found a passageway to Peloponnesus all the way to the right, but since I got a clue that said I needed to get some upgrades first, I decided to leave for now. Well, I tried to leave, but I couldn't figure out how to do it at first, and I got messed up by a bat and some kind of ostrich charging at me. Losing all of your health simply takes you back to the start of the area, and since I just entered Peloponnesus, I went back to the same spot I died in. I left properly this time and headed back to Attica, where I could supposedly find the Staff of Fennel. After getting a spear thrown at me by this little punk, I found another settlement with all kinds of clues. This place was apparently the city of Eleusis, and nearby was the city of Athens. I tried jumping off the side here and I just fell to my doom. Whoops, I guess I've gotta take the stairs. Here, I learned about some large boulder blocking the way to Phthia, and apparently the boulder somehow became a monster called Gaia, but thankfully Gaia was asleep for some reason. I also learned that a vampire named Lamia had kidnapped a woman's child, and the mother told me that she would give me a staff if I rescued her child. I wonder if that's the Staff of Fennel. It is supposed to be in Attica after all. Man, this game is just overloading me with clues. I also found out that I would need the power of Poseidon to cross the sea to reach some place called Phrygia where a fire-breathing dragon resides. By the way, since I now have knowledge of the future, that last part isn't actually true. There are a couple dragons in the game, but you do not find them in Phrygia. Maybe she's just referring to the fire-breathing snakes there? Anyway, after wandering outside the town, I found Lamia, but I got messed up by her. She shot at me with an endless supply of arrows that were super hard to dodge, and I couldn't even manage to land a single hit on her. In fact, I even thought it was impossible to hit her at first. I ran off and accepted my fate by jumping into a pit. I left the city through a different side, and the game branched off even more. Man, this game is surprisingly open. I suddenly stumbled on another city, which I think was supposed to be Athens. Here I got more clues. There's a god in Phthia that makes wonderful weapons, a crystal ball that helps you see invisible things, and finally I found an old guy that said he would help me find one of the nymphs if I could prove my identity to him. Here, I also found Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. She gave me a shield. Wait, so what's the shield I've been holding the whole time? Was it a fake? Well, it wasn't doing a great job at blocking before, so maybe they just didn't bother to remove it for the initial sprite at the start of the game. I explored more of Attica and found Gaia, the sleeping monster blocking the way to Phthia. The game played some ominous music, but I couldn't figure out how to get past this thing. With the new shield upgrade, I decided to try fighting Lamia again, and while it did help, she felt kind of impossible to get close to. I got messed up by her again. Well, I wasn't really sure where to go now, so I went back to the forest of Peloponnesus, but some kind of spider web blocked the way. Maybe this is what I need that fire staff for. I also went back to that area with the spear guy, and my shield made him easy to deal with now. I found another house back here, and the people inside told me about some kind of flask that could take nectar, and that some ambrosia could be found beneath Argolis. Speaking of, past their house was a route to Argolis. This was a mountain area full of caves, and for some reason I found a random kid in one of them who said that a shield made of salamander skin can protect from fire. There was also a dude here that said that a nymph was taken deep into one of the caves. After exploring some more, I found a snake enemy that I couldn't even damage with my club. Maybe this is what the old lady from the tree was talking about when she said that I wasn't strong enough for Argolis yet. Well, what the heck do I do then? I kind of got stuck here for a while. I guess it's time to review my clues. Let's see, there's a nymph in the caves of Argolis that I need to find, but I can't defeat the monsters there. To defeat them, I might need the sword from Peloponnesus, but to get through there, I need the Staff of Fennel. But to get that, I have to rescue the child from Lamia. I guess I've just got to get good and beat her then. Fighting her was pretty rough, but after a few deaths, I finally got a pattern down and took her out. I reached the child, and the woman gave me the Staff of Fennel as I suspected. Or rather, she suddenly made it appear from the sky. This turned out to actually be an upgraded weapon, although unfortunately I couldn't even use its full power yet. Apparently, I needed to find Prometheus to learn how to use it. Great. I decided to take the staff to Peloponnesus anyway, but unfortunately, it did not remove the cobwebs. That being said, I did find out that you can just wiggle your way past them. Not sure if that one was intentional. Man, this forest was confusing. There were all kinds of paths to take, and a lot of them looped around in on each other. Also, these bat enemies were super annoying. I found a few more clues here. Someone told me about needing to burn thorns in the Forest of Thorns, and apparently Hydra was somewhere deep in there. Another guy told me that Poseidon could be found in Laconia, and I also learned that the Gree of Laconia have a crystal ball, which I think was that thing I needed to find a secret passage in the caves of Argolis. Unfortunately, the way to Laconia was blocked by a Cyclops, and I would need to hit his eye with a sword to get past him. I also found another one of the gods, although he never told me his name. Looking at the manual, I think it's Apollo. He gave me a harp that he told me to play at the Monument of the Sun to summon a Pegasus. Yeah, I've got no idea what he's talking about. I found some areas where I needed the ability to jump higher, as well as those previously mentioned thorns, and I wasn't able to deal with either of these obstacles. Well, I guess I've got to go somewhere else first. I decided to see if I was wrong about needing the sword for the snakes, as maybe the staff of Fennel was strong enough to deal with them instead. This turned out to be correct, and I was able to explore deeper into the caves. I learned that Prometheus was somewhere in here, but he was being guarded by a lion. I wandered even deeper, and eventually I found the lion and we got into a fight. I didn't have a whole lot of health at this point, but thankfully he was a lot easier than Lamia. Behind him, I found Prometheus, and he told me how to shoot fire from the staff. Nice. Deeper in the cave, I got a clue that said I needed an ocarina to awaken the sleeping Gaia monster, and that I could fall in the caves here to find a den of salamanders somewhere. I also found the palace of Hermes, but he had left by the time I got there because he was summoned by Zeus. There was also another woman who mentioned that the flask I heard about earlier had floated off to Laconia. After jumping into one of the pits, I found the den of salamanders, and killing them dropped the salamander skin that I would need to make a fire-resistant shield. I also found an old lady down here who wanted 50 olives in exchange for something nice. Olives are those red circles I'd been picking up, but unfortunately, you lose half of them whenever you die, so I didn't really have a whole lot right now. It took me some time, but I grinded up to 50 olives and she gave me a max life upgrade. I think this is supposed to be the ambrosia I heard about from a clue earlier. After this, I headed back to Zeus's palace to see if I could catch up to Hermes. He was indeed there, and he gave me some sandals that increased my jump height. Nice, that's both the things I needed for the Forest of Peloponnesus. I went back there, and the fire attack was definitely how I was supposed to get past the cobwebs. Back here, I found the Cyclops guarding the way to Laconia, but since I didn't have a sword, I couldn't get through him yet. As I was exploring around the forest, I suddenly jumped onto the top of the screen and started walking upside down. What the heck? Apparently, this was a secret power of the sandals that Hermes gave me. Whoa, this is kind of trippy. Deep in the forest, I found a clue that alluded to hitting the pavement of the third pillar by the seashore. This sounds like one I need to remember. Anyway, deep past the thorns, I found the Hydra hopping around in some kind of swamp, and the boss music started playing again. Man, this guy was super annoying to hit. He just jumped around everywhere, and hitting him in the face safely was not easy. I took a few deaths to this boss, but eventually I managed to beat him. He was guarding the spirit of the forest, and she gave me a sword as a reward for defeating the Hydra. Nice, finally I got the sword I heard about. Time to take out the Cyclops. I got him stuck in a corner and he went down with ease. Before leaving, I knew there was something in the trees based on a lot of the previous hints, and basically you just had to whack just the right part of a tree to find another ambrosia. Anyway, past the Cyclops, I finally reached Laconia. Let's see, what was I supposed to find here? There's Poseidon to get across the sea, Gree who have a crystal ball, and some kind of flask. There were monsters everywhere here, and some suspicious pillars. I went to the third one next to the sea like the hint told me, and when I whacked it, out popped the flask. Woohoo, no idea what I'm going to use this for, but I'm gonna guess it's important. After this, I went into some kind of passageway that was completely dark. Well, I probably wasn't supposed to bumble around without being able to see anything, but somehow I stumbled into the Palace of Poseidon here. He had an ocarina that could summon dolphins, but he wanted 60 olives for it. Come on, you're a god, what's 60 olives to you? Anyway, around this area was a bunch more houses with clues. Hephaestus was apparently in Phthia, and he had another sword upgrade. Also in Phthia, there was a paradise called the Garden of Hesperides, and there I could find a golden apple with mysterious powers. I was warned about an evil siren that would rip me apart, but apparently I could avoid its charms using the harp I got earlier. I found another dark tunnel, and here I learned that I simply needed to use my fire staff to light the room up. Whoops, that's probably what I was supposed to do earlier too. Down here was another Cyclops. He dropped another ambrosia, and he was guarding some kind of fountain, but I couldn't figure out what to do with it. I didn't even realize it at first, but I actually filled up the flask while I was here. Basically, you can use a full flask to restore your health, but it has to be refilled at a fountain whenever you use it up. After this, I really wanted that ocarina, so I just grinded up to 60 olives. It took some time, but the ocarina was finally mine. I used this at the shoreline, and a dolphin arrived and took me away. I ended up on some kind of island, and I found that siren I was warned about. This fight was kinda weird. At all times, the siren forced me to move towards her, but if I kept mashing the harp item and playing music, I could resist her charms. I took her out eventually and unlocked another dark passageway. Down here, I found the Gree, a group of old sea goddesses that shot a bunch of attacks at me. They weren't too tough though, and defeating them earned me the crystal ball, which I needed to see invisible doors in the caverns of Argolis. I summoned the dolphin again, and past the island, I found a place called Crete. Immediately, I ran into this guard dude whose walking animation looked a bit funny. What was not funny though was how tough he was. I lost a bunch to him before I found a strat, ducking and hitting his legs. After him was a super nasty area. It was a confusing maze with weird looping rooms and a bunch of intertwining doorways, easily the most confusing place in the entire game. It was also loaded to the brim with enemies. There were these warriors here that were definitely not just Iron Knuckles from Zelda 2, weird shadow guys on the roof, and these flying ghost guys with a single eye. Maintaining enough health here was a huge problem, and every time I died I had to fight that guard outside again. I found a guy that told me both Ares and Circe could be found here, but they were both greedy and would want olives. Great. I had such a hard time even staying alive here. How was I supposed to fill up on olives? After dying over and over, I finally found Ares, the god of war, but he wanted a whopping 80 olives and I had 0. Lovely. I also found an electric force field that I totally cheesed by damage boosting through it by mistake. Back here was a nasty Minotaur boss though, and he made quick work of me. Man, I'm getting messed up by this place. I eventually started using my ceiling walking powers to just avoid every enemy I could. Also, I definitely cheesed the barrier earlier, as normally touching it causes you to lose your life immediately. Anyway, I eventually found an old person who told me I needed to go left, left, right, left to reach Tartarus. I'm gonna guess this is something I should write down. I found Circe, who said she could make me a shield from the salamander skins, but she didn't even tell me how many skins she needed. Great. Eventually, I found my way through the maze and ended up at another side of the ocean. Crossing here led me back to Argolis. While I was wandering around here, I finally realized what Apollo was talking about when he mentioned the sun altar. There were a few places where I saw these sun blocks in the game, and using the harp here summons a Pegasus that acts as a one-way warp. This one here led me back to Athens, a place I had already been to before. This was pretty close to the sleeping rock monster though, and after playing the ocarina like that one clue said, it finally woke up. Gaia was another boss, but it was a pretty easy fight. Beating up the monster opened up a passage, and I finally found Phthia. Phthia was way up in the mountains, and I pretty quickly found another one of those sunblocks here. This warp just sent me back to Laconia. I used another warp here, and this one basically took me back to the start of the game. Great, some warps these turned out to be. I actually decided to head back to the place where I fought Lamia because I remembered there being an ocean, and I was curious if I could ride the dolphin there. As I suspected, the dolphin arrived, and I made it to Phrygia, the last location on the map. Whoa, this place seemed kinda tough. There was epic music, a big mazy area, and tons of nasty enemies like a dark Pegasus and some massive cobras. Yeah, let's go back to Phthia for now. Man, the birds here were so annoying. There were so many of them, and all this precarious platforming just made them even worse. I found a guy that said that the golden apple was somewhere here, but it was being guarded by a dragon. Great. Past here, I found this centaur boss who jumped around everywhere, and I barely managed to take him out before I ran out of health. Past him was absolutely nothing. Huh? Well, I decided to just explore other paths instead, and man, the bad guys in the mountains here were so annoying. I just kept falling to my doom over and over and over. Eventually, I found a random old guy who gave me another ambrosia. Sweet, more max health. I also found Hephaestus deep in the mountains, and he was the guy who Zeus told me to get a sword from at the beginning of the game. There was one problem though. He wanted 70 olives. Not only was this just a pain to grind to, but I was getting knocked off the cliffs left and right in this area. Even if I grinded for 70 olives somewhere else, I would still have to reach Hephaestus without falling once, or else I would lose half of my olives. Well, I really wanted that sword, so I grinded back up in an earlier area and decided to make the trip back to Hephaestus. Oh man, this is terrifying. One slip up and it's all over. I got through the first hard part, meaning I only had one more stretch to go. Sadly, while I was fighting one bad guy, a bird dropped a rock on me and I tumbled to my doom. There goes half of my olives. Time to grind again. After some more grinding, I tried again, and phew, I had some close calls. Oh man, this is way too tense. I'm so close. No, this time one of the leaping monkey guys got me and I fell to my doom again. Ugh, this is awful. At least I learned my lesson by this point and wrote down a password that still had all 70 olives. Come on, come on. Yes, finally, I made it. I got the best sword in the game, the Divine Sword. I hope you're happy with your 70 olives, Hephaestus. I worked way too hard for those dumb things. Not only was this weapon stronger, but it had a projectile I could use whenever I wanted, although it cost some health to shoot it out. Well, while I'm in a grinding mood, maybe I should get a bunch of olives for Ares now too. Fast forward and I had 80 olives and I was back in Crete searching for Ares. I was a bit worried about dying to the enemies here, but after surviving those mountains, I wasn't nearly as concerned. Bringing Ares 80 olives gave me the Bracelet of Power. Not only did this thing double my attack power, but it also made me able to shoot out my projectiles from the Divine Sword with no cost to my health now. Nice. Well, I could just head to Phrygia now, but there were some things I wanted to take care of beforehand. First up was the Salamander Shield. I needed 20 of those skins, so I headed back to the Salamander Pit and started grinding. While I was here, I also remembered something about there being a hidden door somewhere in Argolis that I needed the crystal ball for. It took some time, but I eventually found it. Back here, I finally found one of the 3 nymphs. Oh, that's right, the manual said something about finding 3 nymphs in it, didn't it? She gave me a Fragment of Love, which is finally one of those hearts I heard about, and a letter from Hilda, the main character's lover. The letter explained that she had been taken away by Hades and was in Tartarus. She said that she gave all 3 of the hearts to Aphrodite's servants, the nymphs. Well, I guess that's finally one of the 3 hearts obtained. After finishing up the salamander grinding, I headed back to Crete to get that fire shield. Unfortunately, once I reached Circe, she suddenly wanted 80 olives in addition to the 20 salamander skins. Time to grind some more. I started to grind in Athens at this point because there was a free life refill here, but man, this was tedious. I took the salamander skins and the 80 olives back to Crete and finally got that shield. My sprite doesn't look any different, but I should be able to block fire attacks now. After this, I remembered an old man that said I needed to prove that I was indeed Shmobi, and I wondered if the heart I found was enough. I was correct, and the old guy told me where another nymph was, the Garden of Hesperides, the same place where the golden apple could be found. He gave me some kind of key to get there. So the Garden of Hesperides was supposed to be somewhere in Phthia, but I never found it. My best guess was that it had something to do with the dead end past the centaur. With this key, I can now access a secret area behind the waterfall back in the dead end, and this place led to the Garden of Hesperides. This place seemed peaceful, but there was a sudden dragon boss I had to fight back here. Beating him gave me the golden apple, which doubled my defense. Nice, that's a huge buff. Wait though, where's the nymph? Well, I noticed a ledge up high, and to get there, you had to fall into the waterfall from the top and hold up in a weird way to access it. Geez, this game can be pretty cryptic. However, I still couldn't find the nymph up here. I had to use the crystal ball again to make a random cave appear. Yeesh. Finally, I found the second nymph and got another letter from Hilda. This time, she told me that the entrance to Tartarus was somewhere along the sea between Crete and Argolis. I know where she's talking about, but what do I do there? Well, that's the second heart obtained. I think all I've got left to explore is Phrygia. Maybe the last nymph is there somewhere. Phew, this place was brutal. There were tough enemies and it was super mazy. While wandering, I found another ambrosia and reached max health. It took forever, but I finally reached the end. I didn't find a nymph here, but rather Artemis, the goddess of the moon. She gave me the moon crystal, which was apparently needed to counter a magic hat that turned Hades invisible. Wait, so where's the last nymph? Well, I realized there was still one more thing I hadn't done yet, defeating the Minotaur past the barrier. I had no idea how to get through, but I had almost everything in the inventory screen now, so maybe I had something that would work. When I returned, I had no idea why, but the barrier vanished when I got close. Looking it up online, I think the barrier just went down because I had the second heart. Time to fight the Minotaur once again. I was way more upgraded this time, and finally I could hold my own. For some reason, it kind of just looks like he's chucking a bunch of grenades at me. Behind him, I found the last nymph. In this final letter, Hilda revealed that the path to Tartarus was now opened. Alright, time to head to what I'm assuming is the last world. I traveled to the ocean Hilda told me about and found a new screen with a doorway that wasn't there before. Immediately, I fell into some kind of dungeon and I ran into a bunch of split paths. After going the wrong way a bunch, I realized what this was. That secret path I heard about in a clue forever ago. What was it again? Left, left, right, left? After going this route, I reached another boss, Cerberus. While I hit him, his head slowly got destroyed, but he regenerated his heads if I took too long to defeat him. I basically had to get a consistent pattern down, and it took me a few tries to finally take this thing out. After this was a new screen, and immediately I got knocked back by a bat into a bottomless pit. This took me back to before the Cerberus fight, so I had to beat him all over again. Okay, around this time, the game started to get downright evil. I took a random doorway at one part, and it sent me all the way back to Argolis. That's right, I had to journey back to Tartarus and fight the Cerberus again just because I tried to investigate a door. Yeah, I think I'm starting to get good at this Cerberus fight. There was eventually an old lady that told me about the Argolis passageway, and I think the devs included it because it was the only way to leave Tartarus, but they could have at least given me this message before I found the doorway. I got stuck here for a while before finally realizing that there was a pretty sneaky hidden passageway behind this tree here. Past it were tons of enemies enemies in bottomless pits, but at least the game was giving me a lot more checkpoints at this point, so no more Cerberus. Also, this part was super confusing. There were a ton of rooms that looked similar, and there was a troll door that secretly sent me to an older area just to make things more confusing. I did eventually find my way through, and I reached one final ominous temple. This last stretch was kind of difficult. There were some tough enemies, including Lamia again, that annoying boss I fought near the beginning. Part of what made it tough was that there were just no health refills here besides one person who would refill my health for 30 olives, and as you can imagine, I didn't have nearly enough at this point. There was also this one troll room where upon entering it, a nymph told me that by entering the room, I would be taken back to the start of the temple, and when I left, lo and behold, I was back at the start. Eventually, I reached the end and found a room where Hilda was, but she had been turned to stone. In the next room, I found an ominous battle arena, but Hades was nowhere in sight. After getting hit randomly, I realized this had something to do with that magic invisibility hat I was warned about. Using the moon crystal here caused the moon to shine brightly, casting a shadow over Hades' invisible form. This fight is kind of interesting, as you can't see Hades at all at the start, just his shadow beneath you. Unfortunately, losing to him sends you all the way back to the start of the palace, and he was not easy. He just swings at you like crazy, and the only places I could hit him were either in the legs or on his head. He usually jumped away when I went for his legs, and hitting his head was really dangerous. I died a few times to him before finding something that worked. When I backed him into a corner, sometimes after jumping he would land in a spot where I could hit his legs just as he fell. After a few hits doing this, his shadow disappeared and I finally got to see him for real. Nothing really changed at this point though, so I just kept stabbing at his feet in the corner. After some time, he finally went down. With Hades defeated, I returned to Hilda and used the hearts to restore her back to normal. Hilda thanked me for going through so many hardships just for her sake, and she expressed that being able to see me again was a dream come true. The two left back for their home together, and the game ended with a shot of Shmobi and Hilda standing together as the sun rose. Well, that's certainly a happier ending than the original story of Orpheus and Eurydice. With that, the Battle of Olympus was complete. On to the review. Well, before getting into how much I actually liked the game, I've gotta say, I'm really impressed with Infinity here. The fact that this was their first original game and that it was made by a small team of 3 in only 6 months is kind of wild. It has some rough edges, but the game is quite sizable considering it was made by such a small and inexperienced team. Personally, I think it stands toe-to-toe with some of its contemporaries like Fall Xanadu and Zelda 2. I think my favorite part of this game is the world itself. It's pretty large and interconnected. It basically takes Zelda 2 and turns it into a Metroidvania, and I think it accomplishes that quite well. Frankly, I think the world itself is designed better than the original Metroids. There are quite a few different ways the world interconnects, and there are a lot of sections you can approach in whatever order you discover them in. There are some pretty neat upgrades too, and the gravity-defying sandals stand out as a pretty unique one that was fun to play around with. I think the Greek mythology theme was done well, and I would even say that it handled the source material better than Kid Icarus, even if everything isn't quite completely faithful still. The game looks pretty nice too, and the Hades fight in particular was pretty creative with how cinematic it ended up feeling. Now, as I said before, it does have a few rough edges. One of my biggest gripes is the combat, particularly the enemy designs. I think the core mechanics are fine, considering they were directly pulled from Zelda 2, but many of the enemies were kind of obnoxious to deal with. There are a lot of really annoying small enemies to hit, and the shield doesn't feel quite as useful as I would like it to be. My biggest issue with the game, though, is the olive grinding. I get that they wanted to have some sort of penalty for dying, but too often I just had essentially 0 olives while playing, and the only way I would get enough to make the bigger purchases would be by grinding a ton first. It really slowed the pace of the game down in a way that just wasn't a whole lot of fun. Also, that trek to Hephaestus with the olives was especially frustrating. Despite these issues, I think the game is still better than the sum of its parts. The world is fun to explore, and it's really impressive that Infinity pulled this one off. It's a bit of a shame that the game didn't seem to sell all that well, as I think Infinity showed a lot of potential with their skill in creating original works. It's certainly better than some of Nintendo's earliest titles I played. I gave the Battle of Olympus an 8 out of 10. With the Battle of Olympus complete, I have now finished 70 out of the 155 NES games in the challenge, meaning I am now 45.16% of the way through all of the NES games. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more of these in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss out on the next one. Also leave a like if you enjoyed it, since it will help the channel grow and motivate me to continue this series. I hope I will see you in the next step of my quest to beat every Nintendo game.